She had $32, a thin jacket, and a choice that would change everything. When 17-year-old Elena found a dying woman in the snow, she could have walked away. She could have saved herself. Instead, she took off her only jacket, wrapped the stranger in her dead aunt's blanket, the last thing she had in this world, and held her through 8 hours of deadly cold. By morning, they were both dying. But what happened next? Nobody could have predicted it. This is a true story of one freezing December night that saved 2 lives, create a family from strangers, and prove that sometimes the person you save ends up saving you right back. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll never look at kindness the same way again. Welcome to Radiant Story and Tales. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you are watching from. Let me tell you about a night that proves something important. A night that shows us what we're really made of when everything is stripped away. This happened in Boston. In the heart of winter, when the cold doesn't just make you uncomfortable, it can kill you. Her name was Elena Martinez, and she was 17 years old. Just 17. Think about that for a moment. At 17, most young people are thinking about graduation, about their first car, about weekend plans with friends. Elena was thinking about where she would sleep that night. She'd been alone since she was 14. That's when her aunt, the only family she had left after her parents died, passed away from cancer. 3 years of moving from one temporary place to another. Shelters that had too many rules. Friends' couches until she wore out her welcome. Sometimes she slept in bus stations or tucked herself into corners of 24-hour diners, ordering one coffee and making it last until dawn. On this particular December night, Elena had $32 in her pocket. That was everything. The youth shelter had asked her to leave that morning. Not because she caused trouble. Elena never caused trouble. But she'd turned 17, and they needed her bed for younger kids. That's how the system works. You reach a certain age, and suddenly you're on your own. Good luck. Figure it out. So there she was, walking through Beacon Hill, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Boston. The houses there are beautiful. Brick townhouses with black shutters, gas lamps glowing on the streets, windows showing warm rooms where families live their comfortable lives. Elena walked slowly, tried to stay warm, try and make a plan. She knew she didn't belong there. A young Latina girl with a worn backpack, walking aimlessly past million-dollar homes. She knew how that looked. She knew it was the kind of thing that made people call the police. But she was just trying to keep moving, because stopping meant letting the cold win. The temperature that night was 13 degrees. With the wind chill, it felt like 0. Elena's jacket was thin, bought from a thrift store 3 winters ago. It barely helped anymore. That's when she heard the crying. Soft at first, then louder, confused, frightened. Every instinct told Elena to keep walking. Getting involved when you look like her, when you had no address and no one to speak for you. That was dangerous. That was how you ended up in worse trouble than you started with. But the crying continued, pulling at something deep inside her. And Elena found her feet carrying her toward the sound, even as her brain screamed at her to run the other way. Between 2 enormous townhouses, in the shadows where the streetlights didn't quite reach, Elena found her, an elderly woman, maybe 70 or 75, with silver hair wild around her face. She wore only a thin bathrobe and slippers, shaking violently in the freezing air. In her hands, she clutched a photograph. The glass cracked. "Ma'am," Elena called softly, approaching carefully. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The woman turned to her, and Elena saw her eyes, clouded, confused, lost. "I need to find my son," she said, her voice trembling from cold and confusion. "Daniel, he's waiting for me. I'm late. I'm so late." Elena's heart sank. She recognized this. Her aunt had been like this before she died. Dementia. This woman was having an episode, wandering far from wherever she belonged, not knowing where she was or how to get home. "What's your name?" Elena asked gently, moving closer. Dorothy Chen. "And I need to find Daniel. Where is he? Why can't I find him?" Elena looked around. The street was empty. No cars, no people, no help. This woman was going to freeze to death out here, and soon. Miss Dorothy, do you know your address? Can you tell me where you live? Dorothy's face crumpled, and suddenly she looked like a frightened child. I can't remember. Why can't I remember? What's wrong with me? In that moment, Elena had to make a choice. She could call 911. That would be the smart thing, the safe thing. But Elena had learned not to trust the police. She'd learned that when you were a homeless teenage girl with brown skin, when you had no ID and no one to vouch for you, those encounters rarely went well. And if they found her here with a confused elderly woman who couldn't explain who Elena was or why she was helping, if Dorothy started saying Elena had attacked her or confused her even more, Elena couldn't risk it. But she also couldn't leave this woman to die. Okay, Miss Dorothy, Elena said, making her decision. Let's figure this out together. Let's walk and see if anything looks familiar to you. She took off her jacket, her only jacket, the only thing between her and the deadly cold, and wrapped it around Dorothy's thin shoulders. But you'll be cold, Dorothy said, and for just a moment, her eyes were clear and focused. I'll be fine, Elena lied, already feeling the wind cut through her thin sweater. I'm young. I'm strong. You need it more than me. So they walked together, Dorothy leaning heavily on Elena's arm. They tried door after door, gate after gate, but nothing looked familiar. Dorothy kept talking, her words wandering through time, calling for people who might not even be alive anymore, mixing yesterday with decades ago. The temperature kept dropping. After 40 minutes of walking, Dorothy's legs gave out. I'm so tired, she whispered. Can we rest? Just for a minute? They were in front of a massive brownstone, all dark except for security lights. There was a small alcove near the front steps, sheltered from the worst of the wind. Elena helped Dorothy sit down, then settled beside her. That's when Elena made her second impossible choice. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the blanket at the very bottom. Her aunt's blanket, thin, worn with holes along the edges, but it smelled like home, like love, like everything she'd lost. She'd promised herself she would never give this blanket away. It was all she had left of her family. But looking at Dorothy, so frail and confused and cold, Elena knew what her aunt would have wanted her to do. She wrapped the blanket around both of them and pulled Dorothy close, putting her own body between the old woman and the killing cold. What is this? Dorothy asked, touching the soft fabric. It was my aunt's, Elena said quietly. She died 3 years ago. This blanket is all I have left of her. Then you shouldn't waste it on me, Dorothy said. It's not wasted, Elena said firmly. My aunt believed in helping people. She wanted me to use it this way. And so they sat there together as the night grew darker and colder, two strangers huddled against the world, holding on to each other and to life itself. Time is strange when you're fighting to survive. Every minute feels like an hour. Every hour feels like forever. Elena checked her phone, 8:15. The battery was at 12%. She turned it off to save power, just in case she needed it later. Though what could be more of an emergency than this? She didn't know. The cold was beyond anything Elena had ever experienced. It wasn't just uncomfortable. It was actively trying to kill them. The kind of cold that makes your bones ache, that makes your thoughts fuzzy and slow, that whispers in your ear to just close your eyes and rest, even though you know that rest might be permanent. Tell me about your aunt, Dorothy said after a while, her voice weak but curious. So Elena talked. She told Dorothy about Aunt Isabella, about her laugh that could light up a room, about how she sang old songs in Spanish while cooking even though she couldn't carry a tune, about how she worked cleaning offices at night and serving lunch at a diner during the day, but always had time to help Elena with homework, to ask about her day, to make her feel loved and safe. She sounds like a wonderful woman, Dorothy said. She was, Elena said, her voice breaking. She taught me that being poor doesn't mean being unkind, that you can lose everything material and still be rich if you have love in your heart. She was right, Dorothy said. Then her eyes drifted away, losing focus. Is Daniel coming? He's supposed to pick me up. He'll be here soon, Elena said, even though she was beginning to understand that Daniel, like Aunt Isabella, might be gone forever. The hours crawled by. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Elena kept talking, telling Dorothy stories, asking her questions. Anything to keep her awake, to keep her fighting. Dorothy drifted in and out, sometimes calling Elena Daniel, sometimes asking for a husband, sometimes perfectly clear and present. Around midnight, during one of those clear moments, Dorothy looked at Elena with sharp, focused eyes. "You're freezing to death," she said, her voice suddenly strong. "You're going to die out here trying to save me." "No, I'm not," Elena said, though she'd stopped shivering an hour ago, and she knew that was a very bad sign. "We're both going to make it through this night. Why are you doing this?" Dorothy asked. "You don't even know me. You could leave right now. You could save yourself." Elena thought about that. She thought about Aunt Isabella's words, about the promise she'd made at her bedside in the hospital. Because someone needed help, Elena said simply, "And I was here." "That's enough." Dorothy reached out with shaking hand and touched Elena's face. "Your aunt raised you right," she whispered. "She would be so proud of you." Elena felt tears freeze on her cheeks. By 1 a.m, Elena was losing her battle with hypothermia. Her thoughts scattered like leaves in wind. Her vision blurred at the edges. Her body felt heavy and distant, like it belonged to someone else. But she kept her arms around Dorothy, kept the blanket wrapped tight, kept her body between Dorothy and the worst of the cold. "Elena!" Dorothy's voice seemed to come from far away. "Are you still there?" "Still here," Elena mumbled through numb lips. "Not going anywhere." "Don't leave me," Dorothy said, and she sounded like a frightened child. "Please don't leave me alone." "Never," Elena promised. "I won't leave you." Around 2 a.m, Elena couldn't feel her hands or feet anymore. Her core temperature had dropped to dangerous levels. She knew, in the small part of her brain that could still think clearly, that she was dying. But Dorothy was still breathing, still warm against her body. That was enough. That had to be enough. Elena thought about her aunt, about her smile and her songs, and the way she used to braid Elena's hair every Sunday morning. She thought about what Aunt Isabella had said about staying kind even when the world wasn't kind back. "I kept my promise, Tia," Elena whispered into the darkness. "I stayed kind right to the end." Dorothy stirred against her. "Who are you talking to?" "My aunt, telling her I love her." "Tell my Daniel I love him too," Dorothy said, her voice dreamy. "And my husband, tell them all I love them." "I will," Elena promised, even though she was pretty sure they were both going to die here, frozen on these steps. Two lost souls who'd found each other at the end. The snow started falling around 3 a.m. Big, heavy flakes that covered them in white like a frozen blanket. Elena's consciousness faded in and out. One moment she was aware of the cold and Dorothy's weight. The next moment she was somewhere warm, somewhere safe, and Aunt Isabella was there, smiling, telling her everything would be okay. Just a little longer, Elena told herself when she came back. Just hold on a little longer. But she didn't know if anyone was coming. Didn't know if anyone would find them. Didn't know if she'd wake up again, or if the next time she closed her eyes would be the last time. All she knew was that she wasn't going to let go, wasn't going to leave Dorothy alone, wasn't going to break her promise to stay. At 5:53 in the morning, headlights swept across the steps. Elena tried to open her eyes, but they felt frozen shut. She heard a car door slam, heard footsteps running, heard someone screaming. "Mom! Oh my God, Mom!" Elena forced her eyes open just barely. A man was running toward them, maybe in his late 40s, wearing an expensive coat, his face twisted with horror and fear. This must be Daniel, Dorothy's son. Elena tried to speak, tried to explain, but her voice wouldn't work. She gathered every bit of strength she had left and pushed the words out. "She was lost," Elena whispered. "I couldn't leave her." And then everything went dark. Elena woke up to warmth. Real, deep, penetrating warmth that almost hurt as much as the cold had. She was in a hospital bed with heavy blankets piled on top of her, and 4 dripped slowly into her arm. Monitors beeped steadily beside her. For a moment, panic seized her. Hospitals meant bills she couldn't pay. Hospitals meant questions she couldn't answer. Hospitals meant social workers and forms and systems that had failed her before. But then a nurse appeared, a woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. "Welcome back, sweetheart," she said softly. "You gave us quite a scare." "Dorothy," Elena croaked, her throat raw. "Is she—" "Mrs. Chen is fine," the nurse said, smiling. "Mild hypothermia. But she's going to be perfectly okay. Thanks to you." Her eyes filled with tears. "You saved her life, honey. You almost died doing it, but you saved her." Elena felt something release in her chest. Dorothy was alive. That was all that mattered. The door opened, and a man walked in, the same man from the steps. Dorothy's son. Up close. He looked exhausted, with red-rimmed eyes and stubble on his chin. Behind him stood 2 police officers. Elena's stomach tightened. Here it came. The questions, the suspicion, the assumption that she must have done something wrong. But the female officer stepped forward with an expression that was surprisingly gentle. "I'm Officer Patricia Williams," she said. "This is Officer James Park. We just need to understand what happened last night. You're not in trouble." So Elena told him everything. Finding Dorothy in the alley, trying to help her, giving her the jacket and blanket, staying with her through the night. "You gave her your only jacket?" Daniel Chen asked quietly, his voice shaking. "In 13-degree weather?" "Yes, sir," Elena said. "She needed it more than me." "And this blanket?" Daniel said, holding up Aunt Isabella's warm blanket, now clean and folded. "The hospital staff said you told them it was all you had left of your family." Elena nodded, unable to speak. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "Why? Why would you give up something so precious for a stranger?" "Because she needed someone," Elena said simply, "and I was there." Officer Williams closed her notebook. "Mr. Chen, the report will show that this young woman saved your mother's life. That's what I'll be filing." After the officers left, Daniel pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down heavily. "Do you have somewhere to go when they release you?" he asked. Elena shook her head. "No, sir, but I'll figure something out. I always do." "No," Daniel said firmly. "You're coming home with us." Elena blinked. "Sir, you don't have to." "You saved my mother's life," Daniel interrupted, his voice strong but gentle. "You gave everything you had for a stranger. We have a guest room. It's warm, safe, comfortable. You can stay there as long as you need." "I can't accept that," Elena whispered. "You don't even know me." Daniel smiled sadly. "I know enough. I watched the security footage. Every minute of it. I saw you wrap yourself around my mother to keep her warm. I saw you dying to save her." His voice broke. "You're not going back to the streets after that." Elena stared at him, afraid to hope, afraid to believe this was real. "My mother has dementia," Daniel continued. "It's been getting worse. I have caregivers. I have systems in place. But that night, the door alarm malfunctioned. Mom wandered out while I was working late at the office. If you hadn't found her—" He couldn't finish. "But I did," Elena said softly. "Yes," Daniel said. "You did. And now I'm going to help you the way you helped her." 3 days later, Elena was discharged from the hospital. Daniel picked her up in a sleek sedan, and they drove to a part of Boston Elena had only seen from bus windows. The brownstone was magnificent, 4 stories of brick and stone with tall windows that sparkled in the winter sun. As they pulled up, Elena saw the spot where she'd spent that terrible night, the alcove where she'd wrapped her body around Dorothy, the steps where she'd nearly died. "We're putting up a memorial there," Daniel said, noticing where she was looking, a reminder of what really matters. The front door opened and a teenage girl came running out, maybe 16, with Dorothy's smile in Daniel's eyes. "Is this her?" she asked excitedly. "Is this Elena?" "Emma," Daniel said warmly. "Let her get out of the car first." Elena climbed out, feeling awkward in her borrowed hospital clothes. "You saved Grandma Dorothy," Emma said, looking at her with open admiration. "You're a hero." "I'm not a hero," Elena said uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," a voice said from the doorway. Dorothy stood there, leaning on a walker, her eyes clearer than they'd been that terrible night. You did what most people wouldn't do. That's exactly what makes you a hero. The first few weeks were the hardest. Elena kept waiting for it to end, for Daniel to realize this was a mistake, for someone to tell her she didn't belong. She barely touched anything in her room. She made her bed every morning with military precision. She ate tiny portions at meals, trying not to be a burden. She moved through the brownstone like a ghost, trying not to leave a mark, trying not to take up space. On the seventh day, Daniel found her in the library, looking at books but too afraid to take one off the shelf. "Elena," Daniel said, sitting down across from her. "We need to talk." Elena's heart sank. Here it came, the end of this beautiful dream. "This isn't working," Daniel continued. Elena nodded, trying not to cry. "I understand. I can pack." "No," Daniel interrupted. "That's not what I mean. What I mean is, you being afraid to live here isn't working. You're tiptoeing around like you're going to be kicked out any minute." He stood up and pulled books off the shelf, stacking them on the table. "Take these to your room. Read them. Write in the margins if you want. They're just books. They're meant to be used." Daniel sat back down, his expression softer. "I want you to understand something. I'm not doing this out of pity or obligation. I'm doing this because you're family now, and this is your home. How do I know you won't change your mind?" Elena asked, voicing her deepest fear. "Because tomorrow we're meeting with a lawyer to start guardianship paperwork," Daniel said. "Because I'm enrolling you in school. Because I'm making you legally, officially, permanently part of this family." He leaned forward. "Elena, I'm not a temporary foster parent. I'm someone who wants you here, who needs you here. You reminded me what matters. You showed Emma what real courage looks like." Daniel's voice cracked. "Let me give you what you gave my mother. A chance. A real chance at life." After that conversation, things shifted. Elena started taking books to her room. She started eating normal portions. She laughed at Emma's jokes. She sat with Dorothy on her bad days, reading to her, keeping her company, being present. And slowly, the brownstone started to feel less like a museum and more like home. 2 weeks after moving in, Daniel sat Elena down with a stack of papers. "You're 17, but you left school when you were 14, Daniel said. "I've arranged for a tutor to help you catch up, so you can take your GED. Once you pass that, we can talk about college, nursing, teaching, social work, whatever interests you." Elena stared at the study guides and college brochures. "I don't know if I'm smart enough anymore. It's been 3 years." "Then you'll relearn," Daniel said simply. "You survived 3 years on the streets. If you can do that, you can pass a test." The tutor arrived the next week. Mrs. Kim was a retired teacher with endless patience and warm eyes. "Let's see where you are," she said during their first session. Elena struggled to the practice test, feeling stupid with every question she couldn't answer. She barely passed 2 of the 4 sections. "This is okay," Mrs. Kim said. "This is just the starting point." So they worked every morning at 6 o'clock. Before Daniel left for his law firm and Emma left for school, Elena sat at the kitchen table with her books. Math that made her head hurt. Science she'd never learned. History she'd forgotten. English that came easier but still challenged her. Some days she wanted to quit. On one of those days, Dorothy found her in the library, surrounded by failed practice tests. "You look troubled, dear," Dorothy said, having one of her increasingly rare clear moments. "I'm not smart enough," Elena said, tears spilling over. "I'm going to fail and disappoint everyone." Dorothy took her hand. "My late husband used to say that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing it anyway." She squeezed Elena's hand. "You've been courageous your whole life. This test is just one more thing you'll be brave enough to face." The GED test was scheduled for a Monday in April. Elena woke up sick with nerves. Daniel drove her to the testing center, and before she got out, he put a hand on her shoulder. "Whatever happens today, I'm proud of you," Daniel said. "You showing up and trying, that's success, regardless of what some test says." The test took 4.5 hours. Some questions Elena knew immediately. Others she worked through carefully, using the strategies Mrs. Kim had taught her. Some she guessed on, hoping for the best. Results would come in 6 weeks. 6 weeks of waiting. 6 weeks of waking up at 3 in the morning in a cold sweat, convinced she'd failed. But during those 6 weeks, something else was happening. Daniel started coming home earlier, having dinner with them every night, playing board games with Emma, sitting with Dorothy, talking about memories and making new ones. One evening, Daniel found Elena in the library. "I hired a partner at the firm," Daniel said. "Someone I trust to handle cases when I'm not there." "Why?" Elena asked, surprised. "Because that night when you gave everything you had to save my mother, you showed me what I'd lost," Daniel said. "I'd been so busy building my career that I forgot to build a life. You reminded me what matters." On a Thursday in May, the envelope came. Elena stood in the kitchen staring at it, her hands shaking. Inside was either her GED certificate or a failure notice. Emma appeared at her elbow. "Want me to open it?" "No," Elena said. I'm really scared." "You promised Grandma Dorothy everything would be okay that night," Emma said. "And you kept that promise. This is just one more promise to keep, the one you made to yourself." Elena smiled despite her fear. She tore open the envelope with trembling fingers. She'd passed. Scored in the 89th percentile overall. "I did it," Elena whispered. "I actually did it." "You did it," Emma screamed, jumping up and down. "You're going to college." Daniel came running from his study. "What happened? Is everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," Elena said, tears streaming down her face. "Everything's right. I passed. I'm going to college." Daniel pulled her into a tight hug, and Elena realized it was the first time she'd been hugged by a father figure since her own father died when she was 9 years old. That night, they celebrated with Elena's favorite meal, Aunt Isabella's recipe for enchiladas that Elena had taught their housekeeper to make. Dorothy, having a clear evening, raised her glass of sparkling cider. "To Elena," she said, her voice strong, "who reminds us what it means to be brave and kind and human." And Elena, looking around the table at these people who become her family, felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pure, uncomplicated joy. 3 years later, Elena Martinez stood in front of a lecture hall at Boston University, finishing her guest presentation for an introduction to social work class. She was 20 years old now, studying for her bachelor's degree while working part-time at a nonprofit organization. "People always ask me," Elena said to the 80 students in the room, "why I gave everything I had that night to save a stranger, why I risked my life. And my answer is always the same, because that's what we're supposed to do. That's what makes us human." She looked out at the diverse group of students, all preparing to enter a profession built on caring for others. "It's not about grand gestures or heroic moments," Elena continued. "It's about small choices made in critical moments. To stay or walk away. To help or ignore. To see people or look through them." After the lecture, a young woman approached. She was thin, weary, with eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. "I need help," she said quietly. "I aged out of foster care last month. I'm trying to stay in school, but I've been sleeping in my car." Elena put a hand on her shoulder. "Hey, it's okay. We're going to figure this out together. Have you eaten today?" The student shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "Come on," Elena said. "Let's get you some food, and then we'll talk about housing and resources." "Sound good." As they walked across campus together, Elena thought about that cold December night 3 years ago, about Dorothy and Daniel and Emma, about the family she'd found and the life she'd built. "Why are you helping me?" the student asked. "You don't even know me." Elena smiled, remembering asking Daniel the same question. "Because my aunt once told me that you're never truly poor if you still have kindness," Elena said. "And because nobody should have to feel invisible." "I've felt invisible for so long," the student whispered. "I know," Elena said, "but not anymore. We've got you now." After getting the student connected with immediate help at the campus resource center, Elena drove home to the Chin brownstone, her home now, truly and completely. Emma was there, home from her first semester at MIT. Dorothy was sitting in her favorite chair by the window, having one of her increasingly rare Clear days. Daniel was in the kitchen cooking dinner, something he'd learned to love doing for his family. How was the presentation? Daniel asked as Elena walked in. Good, Elena said. Helped the student after. She reminded me of me 3 years ago. They all remind you of you, Emma said with a smile. That's why you're so good at this work. After dinner, Elena walked out to the front steps, to the spot where it had all happened. A small memorial plaque had been installed there, just as Daniel had promised. In memory of the night that saved us all. Home is where someone waits for you. Family is who stays. Elena touched the plaque, as she always did when she needed to remember, when she needed to feel connected to that impossible night. Still talking to them? Emma's voice came from behind her. Elena turned and smiled. Always. Emma came to stand beside her. You know what I realized? That night saved all of us. Grandma Dorothy, obviously, but also Dad. It reminded him what mattered. Me. It gave me a sister and showed me what real courage looks like. And you, it gave you everything. We save each other, Elena said. That's what family does. Inside, Daniel watched him through the window, thinking about his mother, thinking about the strange miracle of that December night, thinking about how sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back. Last month, Daniel had done something he'd been thinking about for a long time. He'd started a foundation, the Dorothy Chen Foundation for Youth Empowerment. It would provide housing, education, job training, and support for young people aging out of foster care or experiencing homelessness. And he'd asked Elena to help run it. Your perspective, your lived experience. It's invaluable, Daniel had said. These kids need someone who understands, someone who's been there. So now Elena spent her days studying social work and her evenings volunteering at the Foundation's first shelter. She worked with teenagers who'd been forgotten by the system, kids who'd learned to be invisible, young people who just needed someone to see them. And with each one, Elena brought her own experience, her own understanding, her own refusal to walk away. One evening, a 17-year-old came into the shelter, a girl named Keisha, scared and alone and trying so hard to be brave. First time here. Elena asked gently. Keisha nodded, not meeting her eyes. I'm Elena. Want some food? We've got pasta tonight. Real food, the good stuff. As Keisha ate, Elena sat across from her and said the words that had once been said to her. I was homeless too. I know how hard it is. But you don't have to do this alone anymore. Keisha looked up, searching Elena's face, finding only understanding and acceptance. What happened to you? She asked. How did you get out? So Elena told her, not the sanitized version that appeared in news articles, but the real version. The fear, the cold, the impossible choice to help someone even when it cost everything. Sometimes, Elena said, all it takes is being there, being willing, being kind even when it's hard. And then one act of kindness leads to another, and another, until your whole life changes. Can I stay here tonight? Keisha asked, her voice small. Absolutely, Elena said. And tomorrow we'll talk about next steps. School, housing, job training, whatever you need. You don't have to be alone anymore. That night, as Elena drove home through the Boston streets, she thought about all the lives that had changed because of one impossible night. Dorothy, who'd lived her final years surrounded by love instead of alone in a facility. Daniel, who'd learned to prioritize family over career, presence over productivity. Emma, who'd gained a sister and learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice and commitment. Keisha and dozens of other kids who were finding hope at the foundation. And herself, Elena Martinez, who'd gone from invisible to essential, from homeless to home, from surviving to thriving. The snow started falling, gentle this time, beautiful instead of dangerous. Elena pulled up to the brownstone, to the home where someone was always waiting, where family meant the people who chose to stay, who chose to love, who chose each other every single day. She touched the memorial plaque one last time before going inside, letting her fingers trace the words she knew by heart. Thank you, Tia Isabella, she whispered into the cold night air, for teaching me that kindness changes everything. Inside, the lights were warm and golden. Emma was setting the table for a late snack. Dorothy was humming softly in her chair, lost in memories but safe and loved. Daniel was making hot chocolate, the good kind with real chocolate and whipped cream. "There you are," Daniel said, smiling as Elena walked in. "We were waiting for you. Emma wants to watch a movie together." And Elena walked into the warmth, into the light, into the life she'd built from one impossible choice on one impossible night. The choice to stay, the choice to care, the choice to be kind even when it costs her everything. Because in the end, that's all any of us can do. Make the choice to stay, to help, to see the person right in front of us who needs someone, anyone, to care. And who knows, maybe that one choice, that one moment of kindness, will change everything. Not just for them, but for you too. Before you go, I want you to think about something. Every single day, you have a choice. When you see someone struggling, someone in pain, someone who's been made invisible by this world, you can walk away, or you can stay. Elena was just 17 years old with nothing to her name, but she chose kindness. She chose to stay. And that one choice changed everything. What choice will you make? If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, you're never truly poor if you still have kindness to give. Thank you for listening to this story. Thank you for caring enough to stay until the end.